So part of this conversation that I'm going to start with you about is definitely talking about what it is to be a female. So yesterday, if you guys didn't get a chance to watch my coming out video, I guess you can call it, around what I didn't know about being a woman in business. And it really does start, and I'm glad we're starting to have more and more conversations. It understands, first, it start understanding the female hormonal cycle. You, as a female, what it is that you experience emotionally throughout the month, as opposed to just through your day to day. So this conversation is going to have a little anatomy, and then I'm going to break down the 4 phases of how we actually cycle as women instead of just focusing on our day-to-day activities. Hey, Kathy, you're back. So excited to see you here. When we open up about what it is we're actually looking at in time and in space and creativity, this is going to be a big conversation. So I talked with you guys about this yesterday, about the book called Pussy, Reclamation. If I could speak, I would. I'm so glad I'm doing lives today. And just kind of what it went. And it was really fascinating to kind of go through that book. Now, I don't agree with 100% of everything that she said in terms of just her belief and understanding, but I do get the gist of what she was pointing out. And really, I think it's fascinating when we talk about the anatomy as a woman, we are kind of shy about it. We don't really talk openly about what we have as a body for women. Hey, Michelle. And I think that's a sad state. I think we've been so shamed and blamed about how our body looks and feels all the time that we believe the lies that are out there, the misinformation or the myth information around what it is to be a female entrepreneur. So the first thing I thought, and remember I shared with you guys yesterday, Karen made it, so awesome. Hey, Kaz. One of the things that I thought was really interesting that I didn't know about my own body was that the female region is actually called the pussy. And I thought that was interesting because we always talk about the vagina, we always talk about the clitoris, we always talk about the different anatomy, but the whole entire organ that's down there is actually called the pussy. And I was like, how did I not know the actual correct autonomy of that? So yeah, I'm sure you love the closed caption. I'm sure closed caption is probably butchering everything I'm saying right now because it's probably offensive to somebody. And it's not to offend, it's just to educate, to be honest. And so when we started looking at the overall female anatomy, one of the things that she points out in her book, the Pussy, was that how we as women are really meant to be like feelers. Like we are meant to create and have sensations. That's our empathy, that's our connectivity. Is like we actually read emotions more than just listen to words and translate that. So many of you that are mothers, how many of my mothers are here, and happy belated Mother's Day for those that are. How many of you as moms, or even just watching children as women, you get a sense of how their emotions are, right? Like you can intuitively know what your child wants without them actually even saying a word. We read facial expressions really well. We read energy very well. We read body language, subtle body language, I think is what we're really good at as women, because we read the emotional connection for so many of us as we connect with humanity. Because for me, I truly believe it's not a slang term. It's actually the physical anatomy of the female body, that entire organ, which is massive, by the way. If you ever, there's a show we watched which was called Sex, Lies, and Goop, I think is what it was called. It was a show on Netflix. And they actually bring out the whole anatomy of that. And I was like, holy crap, like, why don't I know this, right? So mom here, yeah. So I think it's interesting how much we've been not talking about what we deal with as women, because it seems, I don't know, woo-woo. It seems, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff, crap around being a woman that I think is just so many misnomers and misinformation around what we deal with. And the studies around this are just coming out. Like I said, in the last 20 years, if you go back through, and a lot of the books I'm reading, they're actually citing studies that have only been taking place in the last 20 years. So I really expect this conversation around being a female and what we deal with on the emotional, hormonal level to become a highlight as we go into this. And I love what we talk about in here. It's like, how can you talk about a woman and being in business if we don't talk about our hormones, if we don't talk about our energy levels, if we don't talk about what we think and feel on the day-to-day basis? And so I thought it was interesting that this was like the start of the conversation in order to really unlock women and have them have the success and the authenticity and the consistency and even the longevity of what they want to create in their lives. So this became a fascinating conversation. And really, when I looked at creating and even building an education platform for the female business role model, the female business model, right? So taking what we've been taught in the world of business, which has been cycled and built around the male hormonal cycle. To be honest, that's the interesting part. It was like, we think that what we're dealing with as women is so left field, but when you look at all the training that we've been gifted by our male counterparts and all their genius that they've shared with us, it really does dive into how they cycle hormonally. That's why they talk about consistency every single day. And I mentioned this yesterday also in the video. And so when you start looking at what does it take for a woman to build a business, we have to look authentically at what it is to be a woman. And to do that, you have to look at the actual anatomy and the hormonal cycle of a female. And this was a really, I never expected to go down this path. And by no means am I a scientist. And by no means am I not going to screw up half the scientific language that's out there. And I'm sharing with you what I'm learning as I'm learning it, because this is such a valuable piece of information. So yesterday I started talking to you about how we know there's the circadian rhythm, so which is the 24-hour clock that we go by. And this is actually the time clock men most follow. So they are in testosterone phase. They follow a 24-hour hormonal clock. In the mornings, they are the most awake. They are the most productive. By mid-afternoons is when they have all their meetings and they're connecting. That's when their estrogen actually starts to kick in for them, because we both have testosterone and estrogen in both genders. One just leans more than the other. And so with guys, the testosterone starts to wane in the afternoon. They start wanting to be a little more social. The estrogen starts kicking in. This is when they start having their business meetings. They do more socializations. And usually by the evening times, they're in their down phase. They're ready to relax, decompress. They go to happy hour. They're ready just to be done with their day, right? And so for the male hormonal cycle, this is why the medical studies and all the medical fields study the men, because they're very predictable. And in the world of business, we think it's the same thing. We run our lives on that predictability, because the men don't know how to teach women any differently. They only know what they know and experience at their level, at their thinking. So when you started introducing women into the world of business, we just naturally adapted what was working for men, because we had no other role models. We didn't have any other business models or formulas to follow. We didn't have any other guidelines or recipes that were proven to work, because they've been successfully building that structure for generations, right? So when we started looking at what does the female business cycle look like? What does the female business modality look like? What is that intangible that they took as being male, that they built systems and cycles around? What would it look like for women to take those same information and build systems and cycles around what we experience hormonally for our bodies? And so really when I was talking about this, we started diving into this, and it's so crazy because it's taken years to be in this conversation. And yet intuitively, in all the careers that I've been in, I've known and I felt in my body when I needed to relax, when I felt like I was going to hit burnout really quickly. And it's that constant productivity phase that we get into. Men are fantastic at productivity. By all means, having a business with male and females and understanding these differences in our cycles and how we approach it is actually the most beneficial. This brings back the yin to the yang, which is where we've been mostly at as women. Has been in the yang. We've been in the productivity. We've been in the competition. We have to do better. We don't trust our own intuition and our own selves. And it's like, stop doing that. So really what we started looking at was, and again, this was a book by Elisa Vetti. She's called The Flow. And I think she's just scratching the surface of this, because when she talks about she does a method called the cycle syncing method. And it's brilliant. And I think what she's created and started to showcase for women in terms of syncing with our natural rhythm and our cycle is just scratching the surface of what we actually can do. And so when I started looking at and reading what she was sharing, I was like, okay, how do we do this more organically as women in business, right? How do we balance this more for what we're doing? So what she talked about was that there are definitely 4 phases that us women go through. And I'm going to go ahead and read. I've got a document that I pulled up. This is actually a document live from our academy. When we built out the female business model plan, right, we take you through planning your business, all the elements of successfully creating it. Most of the training out there on the internet, I had this conversation with the lady yesterday, it bookends the information that's in a business plan. So in the world of internet marketing and digital business building, we focus in on what is your brand and who's your audience, and then they skipped all the middle section, which is like the heartbeat of your company, and they went right into digital marketing or marketing in general. So they bookend 2 ideas that were at the top of a business plan and the bottom of a business plan, but ideally they leave out the whole middle section of the business, which is who's on your team, your finances, and understanding what your core value is as a company. So they teach it as 2 separate entities instead of bringing it together as the whole, which is why as a female entrepreneur, it always frustrated me. I always said, I got all these puzzle pieces, but I don't have a clear picture of really what my business looks like. How many women can say that that's something they've experienced? How many of you have felt like you've got puzzle pieces to your business? You feel like you can go online, you can learn how to build an audience. You can go online, you can learn how to market and use tactics. You can go online and learn all about brand story. But do you feel like you're given pieces of the puzzle, but not the holistic look for your business? How many of you would say that that's something you've experienced? Drop a 1 if that's something you've experienced. Drop a 2 if you say, nope, never had that, never thought about that, nothing like that. Because I'm super curious, because that was when I first got started in entrepreneurship, my exact feeling. I remember going through going, dear Lord, can someone bring all the puzzle pieces together? And as I hired on business mentors and people to coach me in my business, I was like, why are we not talking finances? Why are we not talking about a company? Yeah, so you guys are definitely dropping 1s and agreeing with this. Why are we not teaching the essence of being in business? And a lot of that ties into what we experience as women. Now, as women, we definitely have a lot more emotional baggage, I will say, just handed to us throughout the centuries and years of just the belief system of how women should act, be, think, feel. And a lot of that is because when we entered into the workforce, we adopted a lot of the male tendencies because that was our only place to reference. Like, where's the female tendencies? What does it look like to be in the female world? And I had a conversation with a grant writer, and her female mentor told her something I think is really profound, and I'm going to share with you today. Because she was talking about how she doesn't feel like she fits in, how she feels like she's feels like she's inauthentic as in her career, that she always has to conform, and that she was just really struggling to fit in. And her business mentor, her boss, said to her, says, how do you expect to conform to a system or compare yourself to a system that was never meant to include you as a female? The system isn't designed for the female hormonal system. The entire construct of business is wrapped around beautifully how men think, feel, and cycle hormonally. So I was like, all right, this is okay. So how do we take the intangible of being a female? So let's dive into what we know about being a female. So first off, we have a period. So this is the physical manifestation of our hormonal cycle. Now, do I think this is the end all be all? No. Here's why. So when I started teaching this inside of the Truth Bomb Academy, and we started applying this to how we design our business, how we design our finances, how we design our marketing plan, and we really started syncing with our female hormonal cycle, everything started to shift. And I have a few mothers in there, and one of them was talking about how her daughter, who is pre-hormonal, like right before she gets her period, she says, what's interesting is now that we've been talking about this, I'm actually seeing this already start to develop in my daughter. I'm starting to see her on a weekly basis go through these hormonal changes before there's a physical manifestation of her having her period, which tells me that as women, we experience our hormones from the moment we're birthed until the moment we die. And I know we talk about perimenopausal and postmenopausal, and these are all tied in. Energetically, as women, we continue to cycle. And I think that the more we start to understand how we cycle and the power it gives us and the creativity unlocks for us, it is a whole nother element of how we do business. And really, truly, women are the creators. And if you look at this, from even just from a life standpoint. We as women have created and birthed life. We have created all of humanity in some form or fashion. And that creativity is still locked within us, but because we enter into the world of business and careers and all this digital technology, we're told to shove it down, suppress it, and we're not even aware from the neck down of what our body is telling us. I noticed that my daughter is very young. And I think once you start seeing and understanding how this works, beyond just birthing a child into this world or conception, you start seeing that this is the female superpower. And these are our opportunities to really stand out and start looking at it. So first thing we have to understand is that yes, there is a circadian rhythm and we do play in that world. But as women, we also play by another clock, and it's the infradian rhythm. This is our 28-day cycle. And so when you think about this, women actually experience time over a longer period. So trying to cram things into our day-to-day schedule and doing that productivity over and over again is actually the one thing that's the most detrimental to us. So I'm going to share with you straight from our playbook. So what does it look like to sync back into your cycle and leverage your hormones and how you feel and the energy that's actually created naturally by your body once you start understanding how your body works, that you can leverage these superpowers that you have throughout your 28-day cycle to get different aspects of your business and job and career and family and health back into a rhythm that makes sense for you. Really learning how to avoid the burnout, avoid that exhaustion every single day, and start replenishing your energy as women, because we have that ability and we need to honor that as women, because our men are desperate on the other side for us to start being women again. And to do that doesn't mean that we put on more lipstick and we start flirting more. That's not about that. It's understanding our time clock and understanding how we cycle to better balance what we're up to in our lives and our businesses. So phase one is what I call the big picture. This is like your overview. So wherever this happens in your cycle, this is the first thing. So this is the day after your period, and it's called the follicular phase. I would definitely write this down if you got a notepad. So this is your follicular phase. Happens the day right after you end your period, so your last day of your bleed. You actually then enter what they call the follicular phase. And this is the days that follow your menstrual cycle. It runs an average of 7 to 10 days, depending on monitoring yourself. And this is where your estrogen is on the rise. And it gives you a superpower during this time with your mental capacity. During this time, right after your period, this is a time when you can handle really complex projects, right? When you have the ability to multitask at a really high level. This is an energy phase, is all about planning and creativity. This is your body's in a state of new growth and new possibilities. So you're looking at maybe current projects you're working on. Maybe you guys are developing a course. Maybe you want to improve your coaching. Maybe you want to look at planning your family events. This is a time when you're looking at, okay, what is my family doing? How is my business going to work? And this is where you're looking at the big complex picture of how does my day go? How am I putting this all together? How is a month going to feel around this, right? So one of the things that we do here inside the academy is we created a course and a training called Time Magic, and this actually sinks in, and we talk about how to find your rhythm within your month, right? Not just tracking these phases, but looking at how are you cycling this through? What are those important elements? Because we still know you have your day-to-day activities, and just like you just saw at the beginning of this video, mom called, so I still had those things to do. So this is where the follicular phase, this is the big picture. So taking this time to really look at creative projects, looking at the bigger picture, planning events, things like that nature. This is also a good time to go over your finances, sit down with it, look at the complexity of your business, understand how your business is doing financially. Maybe you're creating your business and this is a good time to start creating processes. This is going over the complex tasks of running your business. So inside of here, we walk you through this, we hold your hand, and we actually talk about this, because in having these conversations with other business women, we start to see, okay, yeah, these are different things I could be doing in my business at different phases of it, right? Doesn't mean you're not still doing those other small tasks, but this is where you can kind of sit down and say, okay, this is how the month is going to turn out. So this was a really, I think, important phase, right? So hard to work out when you're older and you're no longer bleeding. That's true, and I know that we've talked about this too. One thing I loved about you, Kaz, when we started in this conversation was that you were like, I'm going to follow my energy. So you started noting your energetic levels, because we still, I think as women, once we understand this cycle, and I know for those of us that are out of this cycle, it's going to be a little bit harder to find this rhythm. But I think as for those of us that are starting to find these 4 phases of our cycle and follow it, one of the things that Lisa starts talking about is how we will possibly not have to deal with perimenopausal and postmenopausal symptoms, because we're already in our natural flow. So I think when you talk about being hard, one of the things that we started looking at inside of Truth Bomb Academy, and especially around our scheduling, was noting the energetics of our day, right? Knowing when we had the most energy and least energy, and started listening to our bodies, like where were the aches and pains, because our bodies are constantly telling us information as women, probably more so than our men, and that's where we need to like start dialing in and tuning in and listening to this. So tracking became a big piece of this. So but I'm glad you brought that up, because it is a critical part of what we teach, because we know a lot of women come out of this and like they're building businesses after, you know, in their late 50s, 60s, 70s, and we're still building businesses. But there is something to this also. The science isn't there yet, but my spidey senses tell me that there is something that's still happening in us for women, because otherwise, why would we talk about hormonal replacement and everything else? And I think a lot of that has to do with the imbalance that we're experiencing now as women around not understanding our hormonal phases and how it looks. So, yeah, my checks and say, but I need to note it down and I'll work on it. It's funny, I've been doing that naturally. So yeah, so there are things that you start seeing, and this is where you start looking at what's the cycle I create every single month. Because we do creatively look at our monthly. That's how women flow. When we get so stuck in the day-to-day, that's where we're burning out. So this is why it looks a little different for women. The second phase that we go through each month is, I call this the start talking and selling phase. I see so many courses and trainings around how to teach women how to sell in their feminine energy, how to ask and receive and give. And I thought it was interesting when we started diving into this section. So this is your ovulatory phase. So this is the phase of your month. And it's not an abrupt shift. It's like a general gradual overlap. All your phases kind of like lead into each other. It's not like an abrupt 24-hour clock like the guys experience. It's more of a gradual blend between each day, which is why we go over that 28 days, which is why when we started teaching women how to build a business, we recognized that it took 90 days, not only to teach them the business training, but then also for them to start finding their flow within that conversation so they didn't feel like they were burning out. So phase 2 is the ovulatory phase. This phase runs anywhere between 3 to 4 days. It's actually a very short time period. But this is a great time to be socializing. So for those of you that like are planning your webinars, you're doing course launches, you're getting your business started, or you're releasing a new product, or you're coming up with something, this is actually the good time. So your estrogen is actually still, there's a surge of estrogen in you. So your creative brain power, you are at like your best. You are lit up from the inside, literally, right? You feel mentally sharp. You're creative, your communication is easier, you feel like you can have those hard conversations that we typically, step away from. This time period, this is very short, has an incredible punch into your everyday month. So knowing when this is coming, this is a great one. You can schedule your 3 to 5 day challenges. For those that are taking challenge courses and trainings about how to build out your 3 to 5 day, this was a good time period to be doing that. If you're looking to have speaking engagements, scheduling them during this time period, if you can, is going to give you that little energetic boost. So just knowing that estrogen really helps the female brain become sharp, become more creative. It's our superpower during these times. This is where the first 2 weeks after your end of your bleed, this is a super powerful time creatively for us women to really hone into this. So make good use of that time. Go connect with others, go get social, go out, spend time with your girlfriends, really just maximize that time for yourself. And I think when you look at how you engage as a business owner, look at like spending more time with your family, spending more time with your kids, like use this time to be really in communication, create your funnels, creating your monthly social media posts. Maybe you sit down during this time and you pick a day and you're like, this feels good to get all this content created. So this is a really powerful time for you because your energy is at its peak during this time of the month. And knowing that allows for you just to have an unfair advantage because every month you get this and you get this brilliance that you get to play into. So I love that. That for me is a big piece of what we do. And I didn't realize that, but it really had me look at like when I was scheduling things and when I was showing up for things and, and understanding how I cycle. And that, honestly, it's been one of the biggest game changers because now I know when to rest. I know when to take downtime. I know when to give myself more complex things. And this totally changes when you talk about being a female business owner, because you're looking at how do I balance family, my health, and everything else. And when you understand how this cycle works and how you can eat certain foods during this time, and I think Elisa does a great job of talking about like different exercises that you do during this time as a woman. So we can't do the same high impact, high hit workout that our male counterparts do. We actually need a more gentle time period. We need a more robust. We have different phases. We have different seasons for how we work. So I'll get to seasons in just a moment because that's really important also. So the third phase that we go through is what we call the luteal phase. And this is the time period where we know that if you've done your anatomy, the uterus lining is thickening. It's preparing for a possibility of a fertile egg, or it's going to lose that luteal, oh Lord, I'm going to just find my words around this, the corpus luteum. And this is going to be the reabsorption or preparing you for your bleed that's coming up, right? But what's interesting is that this time period is anywhere from 10 to 14 days. So it's another 2 weeks. So it's like you've got your first like 10 days of your month, which are really powerful for brain activity, for getting that work done, for mental sharpness. And then this time period, this 10 to 14 days, becomes when you're the most productive. This is actually the time when sitting down and being in your business actually makes the most sense. This is where you'll like go through, like you've created all this video, you got it all done, but this might be the time now you're editing through, you're updating your images, you're kind of like getting it done phase. You're looking to complete projects. Maybe you're working with clients and this is where you're finally like you find that this is the best time to have those client interactions. This is when you schedule majority of your coaching clients. This could be where you find yourself looking at your brick and mortar business and going, okay, what needs to get done to close this out or element. So this is really, and I love talking with women because this phase for women looks a little differently. And each woman, based on their business, look at, okay, how do I do this? So, create your marketing or live events. This is the business at hand. So during this time, you might find yourself completing outstanding tasks or projects. Maybe you're cleaning the house, honestly. Maybe there's that room that you're like, I'm done working with. But you find yourself in kind of a more of like a nesting mode, I would call this, right? Your natural tendency is to wrap things up, bring things to completion. You find that during this phase that your productivity is at its highest. So understanding how you work as a woman and how your hormones work gives you really a longer time period to get things done, where the guys are trying to do everything day to day and they're able to complete tasks or put it off till the next day. Women, when we look at our whole month, actually balance better and we find that time for rest and everything else. So I love this phase. So this is a time where you can schedule things and plan to not be full throttle in your business 24/7. So I love the luteal phase. I do find myself, now that I see it coming, I can feel myself even getting into that state of getting more things done, like wrapping up projects, feeling like this has got to get done, this has got to get complete, and I'm absolutely way more productive before the fourth phase, right? So does this help? Is this kind of like making sense for some of you? It's like, okay, this actually feels a little better. So I'm checking in with you because I'm reading a document. I'm kind of going back and I'm popping back in here with you. So I just want to just do a quick check-in. Is like, does this resonate, or is this starting to make sense? And if you know women that could potentially benefit from those, right? Yeah. So I check on my finances. I do things. So Kaz says I do all those things naturally. I just thought it was just scattered. Loving this now. So yeah, women, we're not scattered. We get called that too. We get called scatterbrained. We get called that we're trying to multitask everywhere. But really what we're doing, yeah, mind blown. What we're doing is that when we honor our hormonal cycle, business looks different in a good way, right? How we feel emotionally looks different in a good way. We start understanding what it is to take care of our bodies, because if we don't start understanding how we cycle as women and honor that and not think of it as something bad or disgusting or gross or inappropriate, it becomes a real game changer for us in so many areas of our life, from motherhood to career to business to all of that. So the last phase that I want to talk with you guys about, why I get so much more done one week and then other times, and squirrel brain takes over the other time. Yeah, squirrel brain is actually when you're probably at your highest mental energetic capacity, where clarity, everything is. So you're clearly looking like you're multitasking. You are literally multitasking, because that is how your brain is working at those levels during those phases, right? I love this last phase. I thought it was really interesting, and it's called phase 4. I call it rest and relaxation, or reset. I call it rest and reset phase. And this is actually during our menstrual phase. So this is the first day of our bleed till our last day of a bleed. It lasts anywhere between 3 to 7 days, depending on the woman. What I thought was fascinating, what they did for the science around this, is that in the female brain, the connectivity between our right brain and our left brain, so our analytical and our creative, are at its most powerful. They are communicating more during this time than any other time of our month. So this is really interesting, because they actually talk about, so the analytical and the creative, when you sit with this as a woman, this is your time to reflect. This is your time to look back on what it is you're doing, look back on the month, how it went, what worked, what didn't work. Now this conversation actually makes more sense for how we approach our life, our business, our family, our raising our children, is taking this time and reflecting back on that month that we created. What worked about it? What do we want to tweak for the following month? Not just the day-to-day activities, but the overall look and feel, right? Do I love where I'm at in my life and business? Like, do you get the sense of accomplishment around this? Where do I need guidance and support? Where can I lean on other women or other, individuals or coworkers to help me do what I need to get done? Am I expanding my network, or am I staying super small? Right? The question I always find is like, do I take time for myself? During this part, I think if you know and you start following your cyclical cycle as a woman, you understand that this time period of your menstrual, that having a day of rest, if you can take it, or understanding that you're going to just need a little more brain break during this time period, and being okay honoring that and not beating yourself up for it. But when we start tracking this as women, we start actually reducing that burnout. We reduce our stress and anxiety, because we know what's coming, and we start to experience it both emotionally, physically, and even mentally. And I think that's one of the things. So if you can, we talk about planning a day of relaxation, right? Understanding how this is going to be a time period in which to just relax. And it's not a common conversation. We don't often look at a business and think, okay, how does this work month to month? But the reality is the guys knew this. Think about it. I've worked with a lot of mentors over the years, a lot of businessmen, and they always talk about that 90-day or that 30-day game plan. They always talk about how everything cycles in 30 days, how everything needs to go over. Like, I remember with our business mentor who we worked with, so he developed and built out an 8-figure business plan. So he shows businesses how to take their business from where they're at and then grow and scale it to an 8-figure business. And so we asked for that same training, and we got it as women. Then that's really the basis and premises for Unlocking My Millions. Unlocking My Millions, that whole business structure for how we had to lay it out and shift and change it for women, is based on the structure of how to build an 8-figure business. And what's interesting is when we look at how women cycle throughout their month, we actually understand that as businesses that start, knowing that cycle and building your business in those cycles actually is healthier for us, and it's healthier for the businesses that we're building. Yeah. And that's when they go play golf, right? But this is that time period where, 90 days makes sense. As a woman in business, if you can figure out your cycle within the first 90 days as you're building your business and start leveraging that every single month moving forward, and you can use that time period to really understand how you're building your business, what we end up building, and this is one of the things the guys have always said, is that we just want women to be more consistent. We're seeing them reach levels of success where they're becoming the power lawyers, the power doctors, the power everything, and yet they're unable to sustain that. They're leaving the workforce. They're going back home and they're saying, this doesn't feel like me. And the reason it doesn't feel like us is because we're following that 24-hour circadian rhythm instead of honoring our hormonal cycle as we step into these high-powered careers. That if we brought in and understood how we cycle and not look down at it as like a downplay, it would shift so much of what we're doing in business. So it really became an interesting conversation overall when we looked at this. Now, the other thing women deal with that majority of the time men don't is the seasons of being a woman. I think this is a critical conversation that we have to have too. So just like we talk about in the business world, just what I shared with you around the cycle, and I'm hoping that you took notes on that, because if you start understanding that, and again, I definitely recommend reading In the Flow, and then if you want to see the practical, how you take that idea of building a business and actually apply it to the planning and creation of your business for that success. How do you plan and use that in terms of how you market your business? How do you use this inside of your finances? You'll start unlocking a lot more potential than what the guys could ever teach you. And that was the one thing I learned, is that women need to be teaching women, because each woman holds the key in different industries and different businesses and different lifestyles to helping another woman become and understand what it is to be a woman in business. It's not about sitting behind closed doors and being in competition with the next female business owner. It's really about how do we collaborate with them. So as women in seasons, we have the season of before we start our period. So we call that the childhood, right? So, and I love this, that we're seeing this in women and in children, that the women that are reading this and starting to understand this are starting to see this in their daughters before they have their period. Then we have that time phrase where we are in what we call the childbearing season, right? And for some of us during that season, we have businesses that look vastly different, depending on if we have small children, if we have preteens, if we have teenagers, or we have grown adults. Our business looks different based on how we're nurturing and taking care of our families. So I think one of the big things we look at often with women is the comparatitis, right? And comparing yourself to another woman. But what we emphasize inside of the Truth Bomb Academy with women is that your business is going to look different because you're in different phases of your business and in your life. And understanding that that's okay, that's a good phase to be in, and not beat you up for not being in a business cycle or in a phase that has a woman that is single, doesn't have any commitments, doesn't have a husband. I'm talking about myself, right? You could not possibly do what I do and how I run my business because I don't have the same, time demand on me that small children have, right? Do I go spend time with my nephew and my nieces and understand that planning that time with them is as critical as how I run my business? But understanding my cycle and flow actually allows me to schedule more time with my family, because now I'm not in competition with my business. Now I understand how this is all going to happen, right? This is all going to flow through. I've got 30 days for all this to take place, and I'm not at the effect of this ongoing productivity, this constant, being told, been in the business through every cycle, right? Yeah, Debbie's been in through everything. And you have to understand that business looks different through different cycles. And to say that they look exactly the same woman for woman is a lie. Both culturally, from our backgrounds and different cultures as women, we each have different responsibilities. We have different beliefs placed on us. And yet, we have to start looking at how do we support each other as women in business? How can we give each other a hand up instead of pushing each other down, saying I'm better than and competing against you? That competitive mode is very masculine energy, but we've been taught that because that's all we've been able to model. And so it really is going to take the women that are coming through the Female Business Academy, through Truth Bomb Academy, and understanding that locking hands and holding hands and supporting each other and cheering each other on is going to be one of the biggest shifts. And then understanding how to do that within your cycle, and then how to do that within your season, right? So if you are at any moment a caregiver, right? I know a lot of the times as we get older as women, we become the caregivers, which is another season that we're in. So business might look differently as we're taking care of our family, or we're taking care of our parents. However that looks like, our business shifts within that, and giving ourselves the grace to understand that is a big piece of the puzzle. If we push at 24/7, 7 days a week, 365 a day, we are not honoring ourselves as women. And honestly, women, we need our creativity back. We need creativity in the world back. We are the creators, and we've been shut off and cut off from the creativity of that we have access to, because we think we need to be more like the men. And the reality is that we need to be more like ourselves as women. And that's where the authenticity comes back. That's where understanding your female cycle and how it works best for you. And it's going to look a little different for every woman. Truth bomb. So this is where it gets real. When I talk about what did we have to do, what needed to change in the world of business, is that there needs to be, and we're developing this, and we've had women already start going through the academy that are having life-changing results, because they understand that when you start knowing who you are and how your hormones work as a woman, how estrogen works in your body, how progesterone works in your body, how testosterone works in your body, and how to leverage these moments of superpower that each element gives you throughout these 4 phases, allows for you to really create more balance and harmony in your life, because you're balancing both the testosterone and the estrogen in your life. You're learning how to create more. And that's the fun part, is that when we talk with women and we get them back into creativity mode, when we start getting them to turn off the analytical and get back into their bodies, as females now, it is so different to build. I'm glad you brought that up, Kathy. It is different to build as a female. And the reason why is because we hormonally are not the same person day by day. Hormonally, we are a different person every single day. That's why guys say we have multiple personalities, right? Or that we're so emotional creatures, is because we don't have a 24-hour circadian rhythm. We have a 28-day infradian rhythm. And knowing that gives us permission to honor our unique time clock inside of what we have to do with stepping outside the doors and being in the career world, being in the entrepreneurial world. But this is such a beautiful conversation. And then when we started blending this in and we started changing the language for how women look at how are they planning their business, because if you think about it, the men have been able to segment everything and say, okay, you need this piece of the puzzle, you need this piece of puzzle, this piece of puzzle, right? But women, we holistically have always, because of our 28-day cycle, we look at the monthly. We are really programmed to feel our way through a 28-day process. So when you start looking at, okay, I need a business plan for what I'm building, right? You don't just need the marketing, you don't just need the finances, you don't just need the brand and the color scheme and your audience. What we look at for women is that when we bring the whole picture together, when we lay out and learn to plan within that structure of that business construct, then the question goes, well, how is this business going to fit in with my family life in the season that I'm in? Does this make sense for where I'm at right now? Does it need to shift a little for the season that I'm at, and what I can do then moving forward once this time frame expires, right? So you're with your children for the first 5 to 6 years. During that time frame, your business might look one way, but knowing that and then saying, okay, but in the next 5 years, I'm going to take small steps so that when their next phase happens, when I'm in my next season, I can then level up. I can really start taking those stair steps instead of trying to crash all this into one small time frame. We look at how women breathe through this time. We look at how we expand through this time, how we feel and experience the world around us. That's what makes us such a critical part to the business world, is that we don't look on the day by day. We experience it like, how is this going to affect somebody down the road in 5 years? How is this going to impact our environment in the next 3 to 5 years? What is the birth and the death of this product? How does it get renewed, recycled, regenerated? Because that is our natural tendency. That's how we feel and we see the world. We're not built in this day-to-day construct. And so giving women this freedom to really explore this new concept and build their business inside of it, you might find that you build a business where you're only working 3 to 4 days a week. You're only working 2 to 4 hours in your day, right? Why I'd rather work with men than women. Men are so much more predictable. They are. They're such a predictable creature that you don't have to do this. But I think one of the things when you talk about being in the corporate world, it's the same thing I experienced when I was a chef, right? If I had known then what I know now, right? That's always the conversation around how women worked. I don't think we would have had the cattiness in the workplace around women to women. I don't think we would have been at each other's throats as much. Because when you start to understand how you cycle as a woman, you're not confused. You're not being run by your emotions. You start understanding how to leverage that energy that you have at different times of your month. And that makes you actually more predictable, because you start to understand your flow as a female inside the construct of that 24-hour cycle. And I think that is where we're starting to move towards, and it's going to take a lot of conversations. I know technology is speeding up fast and very quickly, but how we deal with ourselves as a woman, how we understand our biology as a woman and our hormones as a woman, is going to take us as women talking to each other and really being in this conversation. And like I said, I think we're just in the start of this, and I know we're just in the start of what we're designing and landscaping for Unlocking My Millions, for Truth Bomb Academy, because this is not going to just be like a one and done. We're seeing women accelerate faster in business because of Unlocking My Millions. We see them taking more actions, more authenticity, right? We do see women leveraging their energy more. We do see that it's okay for them to have a down day and it's not used against them. We see them finding their true voice. I hear this a lot from women where we feel like we don't have a voice, we're not being heard. And I think when we look at understanding our cycle and we understand what we bring to the table from that genius, from those 4 phases, man, it just starts to change everything. And thank you, Kathy, for just being part of this conversation, and Debbie and Kaz and Heidi, because I know this isn't a common conversation. And my goal with doing this every day this week is to get myself comfortable in this conversation with you, because I know how important it is to be in this conversation. And I've been kind of sitting back quietly over the last year, building out the app, building out the course, refining it, taking women through it, making the offer occasionally for them to come through Unlocking My Millions and experience this as women. But what I realized is that I can no longer be silent. I have this vast amount of information, and my gift is to bring it to the world to connect more women. And as women go through and understand how they cycle through their business, how they cycle month to month through their business, through their health, through their fitness, through their engagement with their families and the world around them, it starts to create a snowball effect that I really do think will create the biggest ripple, light the most candles, and women will finally feel like it's not that we have to prove ourselves anymore. It's about understanding that we've already proven our worth. It's understanding now your worth that you're bringing. And this is going to be a really powerful continual conversation. And as women join the academy and as they bring their expertise and services and then they understand their flow, they're going to drip that into their businesses. They're going to drip that into their clients, whether they work with men and women. They're going to understand how to develop that conversation. And for me, that is all that I want. I definitely want to see more women create sustainability, consistency in their income. And I wanted to see really the next female millionaires. If right now 3% of the women that are joining or building businesses, less than 3% are hitting that millionaire status. And it's something like even less than 10% are hitting that six-figure status. We're not sustaining the game that we're playing because the game wasn't made to include us. And until we start playing our own game and we start understanding how we work and how to shift the system, and I don't want to say manipulate, but we shift the system to understand our flow, and we work within our flow. I know that sustainability, the ability to ask for what we want, the ability to make those income levels, because we know that having that money, we can change more lives. We see the bigger impact of that money than just honing it for our own good deeds and trying to build our bank account. We look at how it impacts the world, to be able to have that, to give back to our communities, to give back to the improvement of our children's lives, to give back to school systems and education training. So we understand how that and being how the money, we really want it to move. And to do that, we need to look at what are we honoring as ourselves, and are we in our female flow? Are we sinking into our cycle, and what does that look like for each individual woman? So yeah, so tomorrow I'm going to share with you something that we discovered around business branding. So we talk about, if you guys have ever has anyone done a branding training? Like they talk about like finding your colors, finding your logo, defining your audience. Has anyone done that brand training at all? Has anybody? Because if you have, drop a 1. Because it's interesting, is I remember going through training like that with a lady, and she's like, here, we're going to help you build and scale your business. And the business, the branding section blew my mind. It's like, okay, well, you have to know who your audience is. You have to know what your core. We discovered something by accident, completely by accident. We were testing 2 different modalities of training around branding, and what we discovered for women is that when we asked a series of questions that had to be shifted in their language, so we had to change the language for how women see and understand branding. So no branding training, so Michelle's going to love this one. And then what we ended up doing is that we created a creative activity that went along with it, and we told the women to bring their coloring books. We told women not to bring the coloring books. We told them that we had specific coloring pages for them. We told them to bring their crayons, markers, paints, whatever they wanted to use to color with. And we got them into a state that it's been crazy. I remember one of our members said, this class alone would have been a workshop that we did, that 1 hour could have been sold for $20,000. She's like, knowing what I know now, that branding workshop that you guys did was a $20,000 branding workshop, because I got more out of that than I've ever gotten out of the branding training that's been delivered to me in the past. So we knew right in that moment that we were onto something. And every time we deliver that branded type of training, which I'm going to share with you guys tomorrow, I'm going to give you just a little hint of it tomorrow, has totally changed the perception and belief, and raised people, women specifically, gives them an authentic place to stand from. And it wasn't just the coloring that we did, and it wasn't just the music that we played. It was then the deeper dive that we took into how they colored that really started to shift a lot of things. And I will tell you, it has been an amazing thing. So stick with me tomorrow. Come back again, 12 noon Eastern time. We're going to talk about the female brand and really how branding looks and feels for women to create authentic companies. If you're an influencer, this is going to give you a whole new look at what your brand identity is. And it's going to be so much fun. I promise you, you're going to just have a great time with this. So I look forward to seeing you tomorrow around this conversation. I hope you enjoyed today's training around the 4 phases of the female business monthly cycle, and leveraging that moving forward and how to build your business. So thank you guys all again. I appreciate every single one of you, and I'll see you back here again tomorrow. Have a great day, everyone. Bye.